Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Translated by Constance Garrett. You are lying all the while, he cried. I don't know your object, but you are lying. You did not speak like that just now, and I cannot be mistaken. I am lying, Porphyry repeated, apparently incensed, but preserving a good humored and ironical face as though he were not in the least concerned at Raskolnikov's opinion of him. I am lying? But how did I treat you just now? I, the examining lawyer, prompting you and giving you every means for your defense. Illness, I said, delirium, injury, melancholy, and the police officers and all the rest of it. Though, indeed, all those psychological means of defense are not very reliable and cut both ways. Illness, delirium. I don't remember. That's all right. But why, my good sir, is in your illness and in your delirium? Were you haunted by just those delusions and not by any others? There may have been others, eh? Raskolnikov looked haughtily and contemptuously at him. Briefly, he said, loudly and imperiously, rising to his feet and in so doing, pushing Porphyry back a little. Briefly, I want to know, do you acknowledge me perfectly free from suspicion or not? Tell me, Porphyry Petrovitch, tell me once for all, and make haste. What a business I'm having with you, cried Porphyry, with a perfectly good humored, sly, and composed face. And why do you want to know? Why do you want to know so much, since they haven't begun to worry you? Why, you are like a child asking for matches. And why are you so uneasy? Why do you force yourself upon us, eh? I repeat, Raskolnikov cried furiously, that I can't put up with it. With what? Uncertainty, interrupted Porphyry. Don't jeer at me. I won't have it. I tell you I won't have it. I can't and I won't. Do you hear? Do you hear? He shouted, bringing his fist down on the table again. Hush, hush. They'll overhear. I warn you seriously, take care of yourself. I'm not joking. Porphyry whispered, but this time there was not the look of old womanish good nature and alarm in his face. Now he was peremptory, stern, frowning, and for once laying aside all mystification. But this was only for an instant. Raskolnikov, bewildered, suddenly fell into actual frenzy, but strange to say, he again obeyed the command to speak quietly, though he was in a perfect paroxysm of fury. I will not allow myself to be tortured, he whispered, instantly recognizing with hatred that he could not help obeying the command and driven to even greater fury by the thought. Arrest me, search me, but kindly act in due form and don't play with me. Don't dare. Don't worry about the form. Porphyry interrupted with the same sly smile, as it were, gloating with enjoyment over Raskolnikov. I invited you to see me quite in a friendly way. I don't want your friendship and I spit on it. Do you hear? And here I take my cap and go. What will you say now if you mean to arrest me? He took up his cap and went to the door. And won't you see my little surprise? Chuckled Porphyry, again taking him by the arm and stopping him at the door. He seemed to become more playful and good humored, which maddened Raskolnikov. What surprise? He asked, standing still and looking at Porphyry in alarm. My little surprise. It's sitting there behind the door. He pointed to the locked door. I locked him in that he should not escape. What is it? Where? What? Raskolnikov walked to the door and would have opened it, but it was locked. It's locked. Here is the key. and he brought a key out of his pocket. "You're lying," roared Raskolnikov without restraint. "You lie, you damned Punchinello!" And he rushed at Porphyry, who retreated to the other door, not at all alarmed. "I understand it all. You are lying and mocking so that I may betray myself to you." "Why, you could not betray yourself any further, my dear Rodion Romanovich. You are in a passion. Don't shout. I shall call the clerks." "You're lying. Call the clerks. You knew I was ill and tried to work me into a frenzy to make me betray myself. That was your object. Produce your facts. I understand it all. You're no evidence. You have only wretched, rubbishly suspicions like Zametov. You knew my character. You wanted to drive me to fury and then to knock me down with priests and deputies. Are you waiting for them, eh? What are you waiting for? Where are they? Produce them." "Why, deputies, my good men. What things people will imagine. And to do so would not be acting in form, as you say. You don't know the business, my dear fellow, and there's no escaping form, as you see." Porphyry muttered, listening at the door, through which a noise could be heard. "Ah, they are coming," cried Raskolnikov. "You've sent for them. You expected them. Well, produce them. Produce them all, your deputies, your witnesses, what you like. I am ready." But at this moment a strange incident occurred. Something so unexpected that neither Raskolnikov nor Porfiry Petrovitch could have looked for such a conclusion to their interview. Chapter 6. When he remembered the scene afterwards, this is how Raskolnikov saw it. The noise behind the door increased and suddenly the door was opened a little. "What is it?" cried Porfiry Petrovitch, annoyed. "Why, I gave orders." For an instant there was no answer, but it was evident that there were several persons at the door and that they were apparently pushing somebody back. "What is it?" Porfiry Petrovitch repeated uneasily. "The prisoner, Nikolay, has been brought," someone answered. "He is not wanted. Take him away." "Let him wait." "What's he doing here?" "How irregular!" cried Porfiry, rushing to the door. "But he," began the same voice and suddenly ceased. 2 seconds, not more, were spent in actual struggles. Then someone gave a violent shove, and then a man, very pale, strode into the room. The man's appearance was at first sight very strange. He stared straight before him, as though seeing nothing. There was a determined gleam in his eyes. At the same time, there was a deathly pallor in his face, as though he were being led to the scaffold. His white lips were faintly twitching. He was dressed like a workman and was of medium height, very young, slim, his hair cut in round crop, with thin spare features. The man whom he had thrust back followed him into the room and succeeded in seizing him by the shoulder. He was a warder, but Nikolay pulled his arm away. Several persons crowded inquisitively into the doorway. Some of them tried to get in. All this took place almost instantaneously. "Go away, it's too soon. Wait till you are sent for. Why have you brought him so soon?" Porfiry Petrovitch muttered, extremely annoyed, as it were, thrown out of his reckoning. But Nikolay suddenly knelt down. "What's the matter?" cried Porfiry, surprised. "I'm guilty. Mine is the sin. I am the murderer," Nikolay articulated suddenly, rather breathless but speaking fairly loudly. For 10 seconds there was a silence as though all had been struck dumb. Even the warder stepped back, mechanically retreated to the door, and stood immovable. "What is it?" cried Porfiry Petrovitch, recovering from his momentary stupefaction. I am the murderer, repeated Nikolay after a brief pause. What? You? What? Whom did you kill? Porfiry Petrovitch was obviously bewildered. Nikolay again was silent for a moment. Donna Ivanova and her sister, Lizaveta Ivanova. I killed with an axe. Darkness came over me, he added suddenly and was again silent. He still remained on his knees. Porfiry Petrovitch stood for some moments as though meditating, but suddenly roused himself and waved back the uninvited spectators. They instantly vanished and closed the door. Then he looked towards Raskolnikov, who was standing in the corner, staring wildly at Nikolay, and moved towards him, but stopped short, looked from Nikolay to Raskolnikov and then again at Nikolay, and seeming unable to restrain himself, darted at the latter. "You're in too great a hurry," he shouted at him almost angrily. "I didn't ask you what you did or what came over you. Speak. Did you kill them?" "I'm the murderer. I want to give evidence," Nikolay pronounced. "Ah, what did you kill them with?" "An axe. I had it ready." "Ah, he is in a hurry. Alone?" Nikolay did not understand the question. "Did you do it alone?" "Yes, alone. And Mitka is not guilty and had no share in it." "Don't be in a hurry about Mitka." "Eh? How was it you ran downstairs like that at the time the porters met you both?" "It was to put them off the scent. I ran after Mitka," Nikolay replied hurriedly, as though he had prepared the answer. "I knew it," cried Porfiry with vexation. "It's not his own tale he is telling," he muttered as though to himself, and suddenly his eyes rested on Raskolnikov again. He was apparently so taken up with Nikolay that for a moment he had forgotten Raskolnikov. He was a little taken aback. "My dear Rodion Romanovich, excuse me." He flew up to him. "This won't do. I'm afraid you must go. It's no good your staying. I will. I will see you. What a surprise. Goodbye." And taking him by the arm, he showed him to the door. "I suppose you didn't expect it," said Raskolnikov, who, though he had not yet fully grasped the situation, had regained his courage. "You will not expect it either, my friend. See how your hand is trembling." He. "You are trembling too, Porfiry Petrovitch." "Yes, I am. I didn't expect it." They were already at the door. Porfiry was impatient for Raskolnikov to be gone. "And your little surprise, aren't you going to show it to me?" Raskolnikov said sarcastically. "Why, his teeth are chattering as he asks. You are an ironical person. Come, till we meet. I believe we say goodbye." "That's in God's hands," muttered Porfiry with an unnatural smile. As he walked through the office, Raskolnikov noticed that many people were looking at him. Among them he saw the two porters from the house, whom he had invited that night to the police station. They stood there waiting. But he was no sooner on the stairs than he heard the voice of Porfiry Petrovitch behind him. Turning around, he saw the latter running after him out of breath. "One word, Rodion Romanovich. As to all the rest, it's in God's hands. But as a matter of form, there are some questions I shall have to ask you. So we shall meet again, shan't we?" And Porfiry stood still, facing him with a smile. "Shan't we?" he added again. He seemed to want to say something more, but he could not speak. "You must forgive me, Porfiry Petrovitch, for what has just passed. I lost my temper," began Raskolnikov, who had so far regained his courage, and he felt irresistibly inclined to display his coolness. Don't mention it," Porfiry replied almost gleefully. "I myself, too, have a wicked temper, I admit it. But we shall meet again, if it's God's will. We may see a great deal of one another, and will get to know each other through and through, added Raskolnikov. Yes, know each other through and through, assented Porfiry Petrovitch, and he screwed up his eyes, looking earnestly at Raskolnikov. Now you're going to a birthday party, to a funeral. Of course, the funeral. Take care of yourself and get well. I don't know what to wish you, said Raskolnikov, who had begun to descend the stairs but looked back again. I should like to wish you success, but your office is such a comical one. Why comical? Porfiry Petrovitch had turned to go, but he seemed to prick up his ears at this. Why, how you must have been torturing and harassing that poor Nikolay psychologically after your fashion till he confessed. You must have been at him day and night, proving to him that he was the murderer. And now that he has confessed, you'll begin vivisecting him again. You are lying, you'll say. You are not the murderer. You can't be. It's not your own tale you are telling. You must admit it's a comical business. You noticed then that I said to Nikolay just now that it was not his own tale he was telling. How could I help noticing it? You are quick witted. You notice everything. You've really a playful mind. And you always fasten on the comic side. They say that was the marked characteristic of Gogol. Yes, of Gogol. I shall look forward to meeting you. So shall I. Raskolnikov walked straight home. He was so muddled and bewildered that on getting home, he sat for a quarter of an hour on the sofa, trying to collect his thoughts. He did not attempt to think about Nikolay. He was stupefied. He felt that his confession was something inexplicable, amazing, something beyond his understanding. But Nicolay's confession was an actual fact. The consequences of this fact were clear to him at once. Its falsehood could not fail to be discovered, and then they would be after him again. Till then, at least, he was free and must do something for himself, for the danger was imminent. But how imminent? His position gradually became clear to him. Remembering sketchily the main outlines of his recent scene with Porfiry, he could not help shuddering again with horror. Of course, he did not yet know all Porfiry's aims. He could not see into all his calculations. But he had already partly shown his hand, and no one knew better than Raskolnikov how terrible Porfiry's lead had been for him. A little more, and he might have given himself away completely, circumstantially. Knowing his nervous temperament and from the first glance seeing through him, Porfiry, though playing a bold game, was bound to win. There's no denying that Raskolnikov had compromised himself seriously, but no facts had come to light as yet. There was nothing positive. But was he taking a true view of the position? Wasn't he mistaken? What had Porfiry been trying to get at? Had he really some surprise prepared for him? And what was it? Had he really been expecting something or not? How could they have parted if it had not been for the unexpected appearance of Nikolay? Porfiry had shown almost all his cards, of course. He had risked something in showing them. And if he had really had anything up his sleeve, Raskolnikov reflected, he would have shown that too. What was that surprise? Was it a joke? Had it meant anything? Could it have concealed anything like a fact? A piece of positive evidence? His yesterday's visitor. What had become of him? Where was he today? If Porfiry really had any evidence, it must be connected with him. He sat on the sofa with his elbows on his knees and his face hidden in his hands. He was still shivering nervously. At last he got up, took his cap, thought a minute, and went to the door. He had a sort of sentiment for that, for today at least, he might consider himself out of danger. He had a sudden sense almost of joy. He wanted to make haste to Katerina Ivanova's. He would be too late for the funeral, of course, but would be in time for the memorial dinner, and there at once he would see Sonia. He stood still, thought a moment, and a suffering smile came for a moment onto his lips. Today, today, he repeated to himself. Yes, today, so it must be. But as he was about to open the door, it began opening of itself. He started and moved back. The door opened gently and slowly, and there suddenly appeared a figure. Yesterday's visitor from underground. The man stood in the doorway, looked at Raskolnikov without speaking, and took a step forward into the room. He was exactly the same as yesterday, the same figure, the same dress, and there was a great change in his face. He looked dejected and sighed deeply. If he had only put his hand up to his cheek and leaned his face on one side, he would have looked exactly like a peasant woman. What do you want? Asked Raskolnikov, numb with terror. The man was still silent, but suddenly he bowed down almost to the ground, touching it with his finger. What is it? Cried Raskolnikov. I have sinned, the man articulated softly. How? By evil thoughts. They looked at each other. I was vexed when you came, perhaps in drink, and bade the porters go to put the police station and asked about the blood. I was vexed that they let you go and took you for drunken. I was so vexed that I lost my sleep, and remembering the address, we came here yesterday and asked for you. Who came? Raskolnikov interrupted, instantly beginning to recollect. I did. I've wronged you. Then you came from that house. I was standing at the gate with them. Don't you remember? We have carried on our trade in that house for years past. We cure and prepare hides. We take work home. Most of all, I was vexed. And the whole scene of today, before yesterday, in the gateway came clearly before Raskolnikov's mind. He recollected that there had been several people there besides the porters, women among them. He remembered one voice had suggested taking him straight to the police station. He could not recall the face of the speaker, and even now he did not recognize it. But he remembered that he had turned around and made him some answer. So, this was the solution of yesterday's horror. The most awful thought was that he had been actually almost lost, had almost done for himself on account of such a trivial circumstance. So, this man could tell nothing except his asking about the flat and the bloodstains. So, Porphyry too had nothing but that delirium, no facts but this psychology, which cuts both ways, nothing positive. So, if no more facts come to light, and they must not, then, then what can they do to him? How can they convict him, even if they arrest him? And Porphyry then had only just heard about the flat and had not known about it before. Was it you who told Porphyry that I'd been there? He cried, struck by a sudden idea. What Porphyry? The head of the detective department. Yes, the porters did not go there, but I went. Today? I got there 2 minutes before you, and I heard it all. How he worried you. Where? What? When? Why, in the next room. I was sitting there all the time. What? Why? Then you were the surprise. But how could it happen? Upon my word. I saw that the porters did not want to do what I said, began the man. For it's too late, said they, and maybe he'll be angry that we did not come at the time. I was vexed and I lost my sleep, and I began making inquiries and finding out yesterday where to go. I went today. The first time I went, he wasn't there. When I came an hour later, he couldn't see me. I went the third time and they showed me in. I informed him of everything just as it happened, and he began skipping about the room and punching himself on the chest. What do you scoundrels mean by it? If I'd known about it, I should have arrested him. Then he ran out, called somebody, and began talking to him in the corner. And he turned to me, scolding and questioning me. He scolded me a great deal, and I told him everything. And I told him that you didn't dare to say a word in answer to me yesterday, and that you didn't recognize me. And he fell to running about again, and kept hitting himself on the chest, and getting angry and running about. And when you were announced, he told me to go into the next room. Sit there a bit, he said. Don't move, whatever you may hear. And he set a chair there for me and locked me in. Perhaps, he said, I may call you. And when Nikolay had been brought, he let me out as soon as you were gone. I shall send for you again and question you, he said. And did he question Nikolay while you were there? He got rid of me as he did of you, before he spoke to him. The man stood still and again suddenly bowed down, touching the ground with his finger. Forgive me for my evil thoughts and my slander. May God forgive you, answered Raskolnikov. And as he said this, the man bowed down again, but not to the ground, turned slowly and went out of the room. It all cuts both ways. Now, it all cuts both ways, repeated Raskolnikov, and he went out more confident than ever. Now we'll make a fight of it, he said with a malicious smile as he went down the stairs. His malice was aimed at himself. With shame and contempt, he recollected his cowardice. Part 5, Chapter 1. The morning that followed the fateful interview with Donya and her mother brought sobering influences to bear on Pyotr Petrovich. Intensely unpleasant as it was, he was forced little by little to accept as a fact beyond recall what had seemed to him only the day before fantastic and incredible. The black snake of wounded vanity had been gnawing at his heart all night. When he got out of bed, Pyotr Petrovich immediately looked in the looking glass. He was afraid that he had jaundice. However, his health seemed unimpaired so far, and looking at his noble, clear skinned countenance, which had grown fattish of late, Pyotr Petrovich for an instant was positively comforted in the conviction that he would find another bride, and perhaps even a better one. But coming back to the sense of his present position, he turned aside and spat vigorously, which excited a sarcastic smile in Andrei Semyonovich Libizetnikov, the young friend with whom he was staying. That smile Pyotr Petrovich noticed and at once set it down against his young friend's account. He had set down a good many points against him of late. His anger was redoubled when he reflected that he ought not to have told Andrei Semyonovich about the result of yesterday's interview. That was the second mistake he had made in temper, through impulsiveness and irritability. Moreover, all that morning, one unpleasantness followed another. He even found a hitch awaiting him in his legal case in the Senate. He was particularly irritated by the owner of the flat which had been taken in view of his approaching marriage and was being redecorated at his own expense. The owner, a rich German tradesman, would not entertain the idea of breaking the contract which had just been signed and insisted on the full forfeit money, though Pyotr Petrovich would be giving him back the flat practically redecorated. In the same way, the upholsterers refused to return a single ruble of the installment paid for the furniture purchased but not yet removed to the flat. Am I to get married simply for the sake of the furniture? Pyotr Petrovich ground his teeth, and at the same time, once more, he had a gleam of desperate hope. Can all that be really so irrevocably over? Is it no use to make another effort? The thought of Donia sent a voluptuous pang through his heart. He endured anguish at that moment, and if it had been possible to slay Raskolnikov instantly by wishing it, Pyotr Petrovich would have promptly uttered the wish. It was my mistake, too, not to have given them money, he thought, as he returned dejectedly to Rezetnikov's room. And why on earth was I such a Jew? It was false economy. I meant to keep them without a penny so that they should turn to me as their providence. And look at them. Fool! If I'd spent some 1,500 rubles on them for the trousseau and presents, on knickknacks, dressing cases, jewelry, materials, and all that sort of trash from Knopf's and the English shop, my position would have been better and stronger. They could not have refused me so easily. They are the sort of people that would feel bound to return money and presents if they broke it off, and they would find it hard to do it, and their conscience would prick them. How can we dismiss a man who has hitherto been so generous and delicate? I made a blunder. And grinding his teeth again, Pyotr Petrovich called himself a fool, but not aloud, of course. He returned home, twice as irritated and angry as before. The preparations for the funeral dinner at Katerina Ivanova's excited his curiosity as he passed. He had heard about it the day before. He fancied indeed that he had been invited, but absorbed in his own cares, he had paid no attention. Inquiring of Madame Vixel, who was busy laying the table while Katerina Ivanova was away at the cemetery, he heard that the entertainment was to be a great affair, that all the lodgers had been invited, among them some who had not known the dead man, that even Andrei Semyonovich Libizetnikov was invited in spite of his previous quarrel with Katerina Ivanova, that he, Pyotr Petrovich, was not only invited but was eagerly expected as he was the most important of the lodgers. Amalia Ivanova herself had been invited with great ceremony in spite of the recent unpleasantness, and so she was very busy with the preparations and was taking a positive pleasure in them. She was moreover dressed up to the nines, all in new black silk, and she was proud of it. All this suggested an idea to Pyotr Petrovich, and he went into his room, or rather, Lebeziatnikov's, somewhat thoughtful. He had learned that Raskolnikov was to be one of the guests. Andrei Semyonovich had been at home all the morning. The attitude of Pyotr Petrovich to this gentleman was strange, though perhaps natural. Fyodor Petrovich had despised and hated him from the day he came to stay with him, and at the same time he seemed somewhat afraid of him. He had not come to stay with him on his arrival in Petersburg simply from parsimony, though that had been perhaps his chief object. He had heard of Andrei Semyonovich, who had once been his ward, as a leading young progressive who was taking an important part in certain interesting circles. the doings of which were a legend in the provinces. It had impressed Pyotr Petrovich. These powerful, omniscient circles who despised everyone and showed everyone up had long inspired in him a peculiar but quite vague alarm. He had not, of course, been able to form even an approximate notion of what they meant. He, like everyone, had heard that there were, especially in Petersburg, progressives of some sort, nihilists, and so on. And like many people, he exaggerated and distorted the significance of those words to an absurd degree. What for many years past he had feared more than anything was being shown up, and this was the chief ground for his continual uneasiness at the thought of transferring his business to Petersburg. He was afraid of this as little children are sometimes panic stricken. Some years before, when he was just entering on his own career, he had come upon two cases in which rather important personages in the province, patterns of his, had been cruelly shown up. One instance had ended in great scandal for the person attacked, and the other had very nearly ended in serious trouble. For this reason, Pyotr Petrovich intended to go into the subject as soon as he reached Petersburg, and if necessary, to anticipate contingencies by seeking the favor of our younger generation. He relied on Andrei Semyonovich for this, and before his visit to Raskolnikov, he had succeeded in picking up some current phrases. He soon discovered that Andrei Semyonovich was a commonplace simpleton, but that by no means reassured Pyotr Petrovich. Even if he had been certain that all the progressives were fools like him, it would not have allayed his uneasiness. All the doctrines, the ideas, the systems with which Andrei Semyonovich pestered him had no interest for him. He had his own object. He simply wanted to find out at once what was happening here. Had these people any power or not? Had he anything to fear from them? Would they expose any enterprise of his? And what precisely was now the object of their attacks? Could he somehow make up to them and get round them if they really were powerful? Was this the thing to do or not? Couldn't he gain something through them? In fact, hundreds of questions presented themselves. Andrei Semyonovich was an anemic, scrupulous little man with strangely flaxen mutton chop whiskers, of which he was very proud. He was a clerk and had almost always something wrong with his eyes. He was rather soft hearted, but self confident and sometimes extremely conceited in speech, which had an absurd effect incongruous with his little figure. He was one of the lodgers most respected by Amalia Ivanova, for he did not get drunk and paid regularly for his lodgings. Andrei Semyonovich really was rather stupid. He attached himself to the cause of progress and our younger generation from enthusiasm. He was one of the numerous and varied legions of dullards, of half animate abortions, conceited, half educated coxcombs who attached themselves to the idea most in fashion only to vulgarize it, and who caricature every cause they serve, however sincerely. Though Lebezhitnyokov was so good natured, he too was beginning to dislike Pyotr Petrovich. This happened on both sides unconsciously. However simple Andrei Semyonovich might be, he began to see that Pyotr Petrovich was duping him and secretly despising him, and that he was not the right sort of man. He had tried expounding to him the system of Fourier and the Darwinian theory, but of late Pyotr Petrovich began to listen too sarcastically and even to be rude. The fact was, he had begun instinctively to guess that Libezetnikov was not merely a commonplace simpleton, but perhaps a liar too, and that he had no connections of any consequence even in his own circle, but had simply picked things up third hand, and that was very likely. He did not even know much about his own work of propaganda, for he was in too great a muddle. A fine person he would be to show anyone up. It must be noted, by the way, that Pyotr Petrovitch had during those 10 days eagerly accepted the strangest praise from Andrei Semyonovich. He had not protested, for instance, when Andrei Semyonovich belauded him for being ready to contribute to the establishment of the new commune, to abstain from christening his future children, or to acquiesce if Donya were to take a lover a month after marriage, and so on. Pyotr Petrovitch so enjoyed hearing his own praises that he did not disdain even such virtues when they were attributed to him.